Let's get some more now. We're joined by political analyst Lukhanyo Vanga. Thank you for being with us. As always, Lukhanyo, so looking at the issues around the NEC list, around Batabile Dlamini, I mean, she could say, well, what have I been doing in the Women's League all this time? Can you now come and say I'm not eligible? Tony Yengeni, if there's considerable pushback, is any of this big enough to actually put the conference in any sort of jeopardy?
Good evening, Francis. I don't think so. I don't think the people that have been disqualified have the necessary numbers inside of the ANC to be able to push for a backlash in any significant way inside the conference. I think their views have been defeated quite resoundingly inside the NEC, and we can see that sort of trajectory go into the conference as well. So I don't think they're going to be able to have the numbers to collapse the conference. But I think if they were to go to a legal route, they might have something to argue there, because I think the principle of retrospectivity could be brought into play with regards to these rules. Because remember, these people were found guilty of these offences before those rules were enacted by the Electoral Committee. So the idea of should those rules apply to things that they did before those rules were enacted, that could be a legal point that they could take and challenge those rules on in a court of law. But politically speaking, I don't think they have the political numbers to be able to play that game.
Yeah, technically the court could maybe interdict, but you're saying politically they don't have the clout. We'll have to see how it plays out. But did the ANC make a big mistake by putting in step-aside rules, by trying to come up with some sort of benchmark for leadership, and then allowing Batabile Dlamini to be on the ANC Women's League task team, for example?
I think if you remember quite correctly, Francis, she was initially excluded from that list of the Women's League task team. It's only after that the NEC then brought her in. I don't know what wisdom they used to bring her in, or what they were looking at achieving. So she was excluded before. We must take that into account. But also remember, these are electoral committee rules, so they only govern the election of an NEC member. It doesn't govern that person when they are appointed to task teams. It doesn't govern where they are currently serving, but it's only when they come through this narrow gate of wanting to be now elected onto the NEC that these rules then get triggered and become applicable. So for those reasons, those rules would not have been considered if they were looking at appointing her into a task team, because I don't think they apply to task teams.
All right, great. Now, as we head closer to the national conference, there's been a lot of speculation about the role that the Phala Phala report will play, and then the Integrity Committee's own report within the ANC. So the NEC is saying that it will only be tabled now at the national conference. Is that kicking the can down the road, or is that good wisdom because it's such a big issue and now the bigger gathering of the ANC will consider it?
I think it's a continuation of the dereliction of duty that we've seen come from this NEC, and it's quite outstanding. Remember, they've had about 3 meetings on this matter of Phala Phala in the last 2 weeks alone. They had the abortive meeting that didn't sit, that wanted to run technical and procedural issues, that this report must first be processed by the NWC and the national officials before it comes to the NEC. So that meeting didn't come to a resolution. The second meeting came, and that's the one that came to a resolution that they support the president while he takes this report, the expert panel report, on review. A third meeting sits, and again, this meeting is unable to make resolutions. And here, Francis, we're talking about the highest decision-making structure of the ANC in between conferences, and it's unable to make a decision, and it calls itself that. So it's a dereliction of duty. They had the responsibility to process the reports that are coming from the Integrity Committee. After processing those reports, make decisions on behalf of the ANC, and if anyone wanted to challenge those decisions, they can do so at the national conference, which sits once every 5 years. But to kick that can down that road is a dereliction of duty by the NEC that is almost criminal, because remember, the country is sitting with the president that is sort of 1 foot in and 1 foot out. He has expressed to some members of the ANC, confirmed by some senior members of the ANC, a willingness to resign, and he has had to be talked down from the ledge. So you're talking about a country that is flying without a pilot, while the NEC doesn't make very important decisions to be able to rescue the country from the abyss. They just kick this down the road and say the conference must deal with it. And you're talking about 4,000 delegates. I don't think they have the capacity. They're too big to deal with a matter that is like this one. And the conference will refer it back to the next NEC.
All right. So you think it'll be deferred actually again? I mean, how important is this? Because the expert panel report was huge. That led to those considerations of a resignation, but it's now a legal process. So it was a parliamentary process, but the president said he will take it on review. Now, when it comes to the Integrity Committee, that is a political finding. Could it even be more important for the president?
It could be, but he's not the first president. If that report, which I suspect it does, it says that the president must step down or step aside, must resign. Remember the Integrity Committee being chaired by the late chair of Andrew Mlangeni, also recommended that President Jacob Zuma must resign, and the NEC never implemented that. So he would not be the first president, Cyril Ramaphosa, to be asked to resign by the Integrity Committee. And I suspect that Integrity Committee report says he must resign on account of Phala Phala. And the reason I say that is because some members of the NEC are invoking the same excuse that they used under Jacob Zuma to say that he, as a president, is a resolution of conference, and therefore only conference can remove that president. And I think they are mistaken when they do or say that. So I suspect that it says that, and now the NEC doesn't want to take take the decisions, the difficult decisions that they've been elected by members of the ANC to take as the highest decision-making structure of the ANC, and they are deferring this matter. And to what? To conference. Conference is not going to deal with this matter. They're going to defer it back to the NEC, and maybe the next NEC will be able to take the difficult decisions that are needed when the moment requires those decisions.
If you are right, does that prove that the Integrity Committee is not taken very seriously by the ANC? It hasn't had teeth, and there were hopes that it would be stronger, but is that the case now? It doesn't have teeth still?
No, the Integrity Committee of the ANC doesn't have teeth, and it's complained about that for a long time. Remember the people that it's found against and has asked them to resign. All of those people still haven't resigned. The NEC is still either not processing their reports and asking them to resign, or they are doing what they've done now, delaying the finalization of those matters and therefore leaving those people to continue to serve in those structures. The ANC needs to make sure that it empowers its Integrity Committee to have powers, recommendations that are binding, as we do with the Public Protector, that their recommendations cannot be simply ignored but must be implemented, and people must abide by those recommendations. And I think that is what this conference needs to do, to empower that Integrity Committee to continue to protect the integrity of the ANC.
And finally, it's really interesting what you say, that you believe the Integrity Committee has found against the president because members of the NEC are saying this has to be a resolution of conference. Does that mean you believe they've gotten sight of the Integrity Committee report? I mean, how tightly secured would a report like this be, or have they seen it? Has the president seen it?
I suspect they've seen it. I mean, they said on the 9th and were supposed to be discussing this report. So what else would they have been doing there for all those hours that they were there? They've had sight of the report, and people do know what the report, what is contained in the report. And I think that's the reason why they've deferred this report to national conference. Because if the report didn't say anything or have such drastic findings against the president, then what would be the reason to defer it to national conference for a decision? Because nothing would have been found against the president.
All right, thank you very much. And saying that the NEC should have dealt with that report already. Lucanio Van, political analyst, thank you.